whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. Whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. I said certified freak. 7 days a week. Wet ass P word. Make that pullout game weak. Yeah, you effing with some wet ass P word. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass P word. Give me everything you've got for this wet ass P word.
There's only one housing story that we're talking about this week. I swear to God, if I hear one more fucking person talk about the fucking house. We're actually going to talk about something that's a little more pressing, and that is the 75,000 evictions that corporate landlords have filed during the pandemic. Let's go ahead and get started with our first story. The Selection Committee on the Coronavirus Crisis held a hearing last month to evaluate the scope of the eviction crisis spearheaded by corporate landlords. Representative Clyburn, who chaired the hearing, called for witnesses to discuss how corporate landlords have had a disproportionate impact on vulnerable tenants, citing research on 4 companies in particular. Ventron Management filed at least 2,179 evictions, even though the company only controls 8,000 units, effectively attempting to evict more than a quarter of their tenants. Invitation Homes filed at least 932 evictions across 6 states, including disabled veterans and transportation workers affected by the pandemic, while experiencing a 30% increase in profits during 2020. Pretium Partners, the parent company of Progress Residential, filed at least 1,750 evictions and appear to be filing those evictions at dramatically higher rates in majority Black counties than in majority white counties. The Siegel Group filed at least 573 evictions and has rapidly increased the share of its eviction filings that are purportedly for reasons other than non-payments. All of these corporate landlords are morally reprehensible, do not get me wrong, but I want to focus on one group in particular, and that is Invitation Homes. Invitation Homes didn't file the most evictions, but that's not because they are one rung up on the corporate ethic ladder. It's just because they've been doing this for a while, the longest, if you will. They know how to skirt bad press, bad reputations by putting together a facade. Invitation Homes is one of the most seasoned slumlords who knows how to skirt public backlash better than any other corporate landlord shill. I wouldn't be surprised if they cooked up this strategy in one of their quarterly board meetings, where they decided to limit the total number of evictions so they don't look like the worst corporate landlord. You know what I mean? Instead, they probably took stock of their non-paying tenants and put them on a specific list. You know, the evict this poor leeching, probably faking their unemployment status just to take advantage of the fact that we can't legally evict them because they filed the CDC declaration of hardship and will be subject to our swift expulsion the second the moratorium on evictions is lifted, regardless of their application for rental assistance requesting the full amount of outstanding rent that they owe us. This isn't hyperbolic. An industry expert who testified at this meeting made this abundantly clear. Private equity firms and other corporate landlords have filed to evict at least 75,000 residents since the Trump administration put a moratorium in place to halt evictions last September. These filings have disproportionately impacted residents of color, particularly Black renters. In some cases, corporate landlords have refused to accept rental assistance even after their residents had been approved for it. Another testimony from that hearing was a recently evicted individual who described her experience being forced out of her home by one of the corporate landlords under investigation, don't know which one, can't make any assumptions here. But I mean, we don't know that it wasn't Invitation Homes. Maybe it was. This was her experience. The fear of homelessness became a reality for me. I was concerned that my son and I wouldn't have nowhere to go but to a shelter. I was concerned about our health because of the pandemic, and I was concerned about his school and how he would be affected. I had never faced this type of stress before, and I had no idea what I was going to be able to do with little income and no home. Fuck, I always get so upset whenever I hear these stories. Like, We gotta talk about corporate landlords a little more, just to get better informed about what they're doing, where they come from, how dirty they are. It goes all the way back to 2008, of course, in the wake of the 2008 subprime mortgage collapse. After the largest foreclosure crisis in American history, investment bank Morgan Stanley released a report highlighting the potential benefit of purchasing foreclosed homes, as a likely paradigm shift would inevitably lead to a demand for more rental properties, as the prospect for homeownership under our current market constraints and federal borrowing standards became increasingly out of reach for most households. Institutional investors on Wall Street began acquiring distressed single-family homes specifically to convert them into single-family rental units. And this is where Invitation Homes comes from. They were originally a subsidiary of Blackstone, the private equity giant on Wall Street. Now it's publicly owned and the largest single-family rental unit property owner in the country. We're talking 80,000 units across 16 markets. But Invitation Homes comes from humble beginnings. And when I say humble beginnings, I mean that Blackstone's business model was based on acquiring low-income valued homes in distressed areas specifically to put money into renovating them and renting the homes at a higher cost than what would have been the monthly mortgage if the home would have stayed on the buyer's market. One of Invitation Homes' largest bulk purchases was in Atlanta, where 16% of the units were occupied by Section 8 housing voucher recipients. Literally, Invitation Homes was based on predatory investments into poor neighborhoods, and after the rehabilitation process, they used their portfolios of gentrified spaces to create a new asset class through the issuance of rental receipts into publicly issued real estate investment trusts. All right, let's make sense of this. A real estate investment trust is an investment vehicle to capitalize off the cost of land once it appreciates in value. Institutional investors set up REITs to build investor capital, to make initial home purchases that are placed on the rental market. Renters' money is then paid out of the investors of the REITs, and Invitation Homes pockets the rest. Got it. To grow the collateralized market on income-producing investments, Invitation Homes spearheaded the single-family rental securitization market. To put it a little more simply, imagine that there was an exclusive market on Wall Street betting on whether a non-qualified homebuyer could pull off paying a predatory loan with unbearably high interest rates that kicked in 2 years into the loan's life cycle. But instead, Wall Street investors hedged their bets on whether or not tenants could pull off paying their monthly rent, subject to price gouging, unexpected fees, and a guaranteed penalty if rent is a second late. Corporate landlords have financed their growth by selling billions of dollars in bonds, which is the rental market equivalent of the mortgage-backed securities that, kind of led to the 2008 market crash. These billion-dollar bonds are created from the real money taken from pension funds and other institutional investors on Wall Street. Corporate landlords are also twice as likely to evict than smaller institutional investors or mom-and-pop landlords. This is most likely due to their fiduciary responsibility to their financiers. To keep the payments to the bond investors rolling, corporate landlords rely on a steady flow of cash taken directly from renters' pockets. These monthly rents are based on home evaluations used for pledging collateral to those investors. The higher the expected rents, the more investors are willing to pay for the bonds. The price of each bond is determined by the broker price opinion, or the BPO, which is the cheaper alternative to a licensed inspector conducting an appraisal. Funny thing, Congress actually banned BPOs in the wake of the 2008 foreclosure crisis because of the role in securing collateralized debt obligations on subprime mortgage markets. But these restrictions only apply to individual mortgages, not institutional investors buying homes in bulk. Also, private equity firms are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. They surpass some of the more stringent guidelines that apply to FDIC-approved banks. I mean, unregulated Wall Street gambling, what's the worst that could happen? Well, let's start with the likelihood that rent prices are extremely inflated from the valuations conducted by those non-licensed independent contractors. According to regulatory filings with the SEC, contractors were instructed to only inspect the exterior of the home and to assume that the interiors had been remodeled to the standards advertised on the Invitation Homes website. I can't help but wonder how much of that 20 grand worth of renovations actually went into the inside of the house. Right, we got the dirty deeds on corporate landlords. Let's move it to data. We're going to be taking a closer look at Invitation Homes, starting with their market portfolio. Invitation Homes has 80,000 units across 16 markets, typically in the southern regions of the United States. This map breaks down the precise location of each of their units, as well as the size of each market. They've also seemingly targeted specific markets that are growing population-wise. Those are in Atlanta, Georgia, and Phoenix, Arizona. But they're also evicting a lot of tenants right now. Nearly 2% of all tenants in Florida have experienced eviction filings. That's a lot of people. There's a lot of old people in Florida. Invitation Homes could literally be kicking out old people right now. They don't give a fuck. We also see in Texas and the West market that roughly 1% of the total population of tenants are experiencing eviction filings as well. In addition to filing frequent evictions, Invitation Homes has also reportedly made a lot of money in profits in 2020. So if they are maximizing their profits right now during a pandemic, that means that they're increasing rents. And it turns out that yes, for all new leases that are signed with Invitation Homes, markets are experiencing upwards of 27% increases in rates. These are the increased rents in each city that have been imposed by Invitation Homes on new lease agreements. Phoenix, Arizona has increased their rents by 23.6%. Las Vegas, Nevada increased by 22.1%. Seattle, Washington increased rents by 15.8%. San Francisco, California, and Northern California increased rents by 15.8%. Atlanta, Georgia increased rents by 15.6%. Minneapolis, Minnesota, 8.8%. Chicago, Illinois, 8.6%, Houston, Texas, 7.4%. Now, mind you, these are for new leases, but let's look at the increased rates that are charged to existing tenants to renew their leases. So we got Atlanta, Chicago, Las Vegas, Orlando, Phoenix, Seattle, and Tampa, who are all experiencing increased rental charges for renewing their leases. Okay, so now that we know that the cost burden has been placed back onto the renter, let's look at the total number of profits that are generated by investors. This is the Invitation Homes net income available to common stockholders. Looks like they're doing okay. This graph is breaking down the Invitation Homes median rent compared to the single-family rental national median. So, what this means is that Invitation Homes charges an additional $200 in monthly rent compared to all other single-family rental companies. It's more expensive to live in an Invitation Homes dwelling, and they are literally taking over some markets, leaving renters with no choice but to rent from them. A couple other really great points made by Wolf Street. 3 of the 16 markets, Minneapolis, Chicago, and Houston, got away with single-digit lease-over-lease rent increases. The rest of the 13 markets saw a double-digit rent spike. All combined new leases and renewals brought the increased rates up to an average of 8%. This is compared to a 3.3% overall increase in rent across the entire market. I'm an anti-capitalist, anti-landlord, Maoist, memeing, online leftist. I hate Invitation Homes, but I hate even more that they have duped people into thinking that they give a fuck about them. Truly shameless shit. Look at the way that they posture themselves. Like they're not like the other corporate landlords, like they're better. It's just all bullshit, just look at it. Just look at it.
What does it mean to lease friendlier? Simply put, it means to lease from Invitation Homes.
It's really refreshing to have a company that cares about the home I live in and whether or not I'm happy in it.
My children and I love our home. We love our neighborhood. We love the schools.
And it has just meant the world to us to have our first home together and to have a space where we can have everybody over.
Having a backyard, barbecue, I actually like lawn care. I like cutting the grass.
I have a little beagle named Rosie, and she really enjoys having space to run around.
This is the first time that I've ever leased a home. I didn't expect it to be as easy as it was.
Invitation Homes has this amazing smart home technology. They know what we want.
Leasing from Invitation Homes gives us so much confidence because they are a professional leasing company.
You can honestly tell that they care about the homes that they lease and the people that's within them.
They stand by what they say, and they're there for you.
No wonder we're the nation's premier home leasing company. Invitation Homes. Lease friendlier.
But Invitation Homes doesn't stop there. They don't stop their outreach just by putting nice promotional videos online. Oh no! They target local politicians as well. Our final story talks about how Invitation Homes' corporate outreach strategies didn't necessarily work on one of my friends, who is a leftist city council member in Aurora, Colorado. Let's get into it. So my friend, Juan Marcano, is the city council member in Aurora, Colorado's 4th Ward. He sent me this letter that he received earlier in the spring directly from, you guessed it, read it. Dear Councilmember Juan Marcano, as the nation's leading slumlord, Invitation Homes is proud to shield to you and see if there is any business opportunities you would be willing to give us. Tax breaks, we'll take them. Also, we want to stay in your good graces because we know that right now you might have heard we're evicting people. We're privileged to operate in your community. Enclosed, you'll find our one-page shill reports. Look at how many homes we are providing. Please be a neoliberal shill like us. Bye. So obviously, Juan wasn't falling for this. He is not trying to give any special treatment to Invitation Homes or any other corporate landlord for that matter. I actually had the opportunity to speak with Juan about this at great length whenever he brought this to my attention. Here is his response to Invitation Homes' shameless plug.
That letter, I just kind of wanted to share that. That's something that we all got in our inboxes, back in March, and it's kind of standard fare. I've seen that a lot of industry who does business in the city, so like we'll get letters like that from like oil and gas operators, some other rental companies, and then Invitation was one that really stood out to me because I'm aware of Blackstone and their dealings throughout the U.S. and we've noticed that the housing market here in Aurora is really, really heated. I mean, it is all over the country in most major metros, but in Aurora it is bonkers. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal or WAPO, one of those big national publications, where what was it, like 20%, or as much as 20% of all like real estate transactions for single family homes in most major metro markets were due to real estate investment trusts. And what was it they called it, permanent capital. So that is what, in my opinion, and I think the data backs this up, is really driving the ballooning cost of real estate in Aurora and across the country. And I wanted to see what we could do to kind of not necessarily get ahead of it, because it's a little late for that, but to try to like tamp that down and restore some sanity and stability to the market.
So how exactly do you intervene as a city council member to try to put some sort of price ceiling on the total cost of the owner's market in particular when you've already received some pushback?
That's part of the frustration. Like, we've been trying to do something like this since like April. And our city attorney's office, I'll give them credit, they've done a tremendous amount of research, and I can't give away all the specifics because I think it's like pseudo confidential information still, but basically we're getting pushback on I think I would actually argue uncharitable interpretations of the contract clause, the 14th, 4th, and 5th amendments. So part of the issue is, when we look at what other countries have done to kind of combat this predatory behavior. Like I think I remember like in Spain, I think that it was in Madrid or Barcelona, one of the two, where like one of their local governments basically was like, hey, landlords, you need to stop raising rents on people and driving them, to get evicted. And if you don't, we're going to seize your property and turn it into public housing.
Yep.
Like that kind of direct, aggressive approach, I love, because I believe housing should not be a commodity. It's a basic necessity for existence in a civilized society. But we can't do that kind of stuff here. So we have to get a little more creative, since our laws are structured differently. And, I looked at Hawaii. One of my good friends, who is a tenants' rights attorney and very passionate about housing justice, brought Hawaii's situation to my attention and what they kind of did to tamp down on not just predatory behavior, but really like consolidation in their housing market. The latter part, though, is like the consolidation info. That's not something that we have readily available as a city. So it's going to require partnership with the 3 counties that serve Aurora and their assessors' offices to grab that information. Because you can pretty easily, just like through the county assessor's office, just like click on, we have a really great GIS system for Arapahoe County, and you can just click on different properties and see who owns it, when they were sold, and, just match up, like, is the owner the same as the occupant? Is it a similar family name, or is it an LLC? And what you'll quickly find is that there's a ton of LLCs out there, oftentimes the same LLC, who own property all over the city.
Right. All right, so tell me more about this consolidation. Wait, is that something that you can talk about, or?
So we need to basically gather information from the assessor's offices for our counties, since Aurora is just a city and not a county, and basically prove that there's enough consolidation that intervention is warranted, especially in the single-family market, and then try to see if we can actually whip the political support that we need for this, because I think it's going to be very difficult for folks to argue that allowing REITs and other permanent capital or organized capital to just basically create a city and society of renters is actually a benefit to anybody at all. I think that this is something that's been going on since the Great Recession, as you mentioned earlier, and that's when we really saw this like trend begin to take off. It started innocuously enough with like the, HGTV, like this is how you flip a house, kind of programming.
Yeah.
And that basically, once you infuse that with permanent capital, it becomes exceptionally predatory in a hurry. And I think we've kind of just hit like a critical mass, where it's at the point where regular working people cannot afford to buy a home or start a family, let alone generate any kind of wealth from their home, which is a problematic practice as is. But business as usual, basically, that door is closed for the vast majority of people in the city. And I think that it's time that we not only try to intervene in the market to actually like restore sanity so that people can actually buy homes, and we're not just selling homes that are going to be turned around and rented out at ridiculous prices, but that we also as a city create a public option for housing.
That being said, thank you so much for watching this episode of Housing News with Amy C3, and we'll see you next time.